Garrett.
School.
I hear you now.
Okay.
Okay. Garrett, we've been trying to make contact with you. Do you have anything to report?
No, I'll skip the report for tonight.
Okay, all right. Okay, commissioners, do you have anything to report today? Nothing to report. Okay, goals list. Are there any additions, corrections, concerns? No. Visitors' comments. So have any visitors' comments not related to the agenda tonight? No, but we're moving right along tonight. All right. So I am going to open the public hearing on file 23-05 ZTA. The proposal amends the Gerhardt zoning ordinance section 6.070, landscaping, vegetation, and revegetation, and tree preservation regarding permit approval procedures and standards for removing trees. I need to read the hearing's disclosure statement. Please bear with me. All persons testifying shall be deemed party to the application and must provide their name and full mailing address if they wish to be notified of the decision, continuances, appeals, or other procedural actions required by the code. The city zoning code specifies applicable criteria to be relied upon in making a decision. Those criteria and findings of fact are in the city staff report. Public testimony should be limited to those criteria and findings of fact or to other city or state land use standards that the person testifying believes apply to proposed land use action. Failure to raise an issue in person or in writing with sufficient people to afford the hearing body and parties to the hearing an opportunity to respond to that issue precludes appeal to the city council or land use board of appeals or to seek damages in circuit court due to a condition of approval. Before the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may ask the planning commission for an opportunity to present additional relevant evidence, arguments, or testimony that is within the scope of the hearing. The hearings body shall grant the request by scheduling a date to finish the hearing, a continuance to a time and date certain, or by leaving the record open for additional evidence, argument, or testimony pursuant to ORS 197.763 6A through E. Commissioners, do any of you need to declare a conflict of interest and ex parte contact or personal bias? Hearing none, does any member of the audience challenge the commission's ability to make an impartial decision? No. It is time for the staff report. Garrett?
All right, Chair and Planning Commissioners, thank you. I'm going to review the proposed amendments in more detail than you would need me to, because we have members of the public that might benefit from some more background on this. And I'll start by describing the actual proposed amendments, the approval criteria, and some of the discussions that we've had over the last several months. So currently, the Gerhardt zoning ordinance regulates removal of trees if you're cutting more than 5 trees in a year. And in those cases, applicants are required to come to the Planning Commission to obtain a permit to remove more than 5 trees in a year. And there's criteria that have to be met for that approval to be granted, similar to what you would have for a variance or a conditional use approval. There's discretionary judgment involved. And those kinds of decisions lie with the planning commission rather than with city staff like Angelina. Currently, if you want to cut less than 5 trees in a year, there's no permit required, and you don't have to notify city staff. And as long as it's not, like in a wetland or in the beach and dune overlay zone, or a riparian area or some other special place, you can just go ahead and do that. So the proposed amendments leave in place the existing requirements for those who want to cut down more than 5 trees in a year. That will still be a planning commission decision. If you want to cut down less than 5 trees in a year, say 1 tree or 4 trees, then the proposed amendments would require someone to apply for a permit from city staff, and provide some basic information about the tree cutting that's proposed. And then again, as long as that request is consistent with other laws in the city, like wetlands and the beach and dune overlay zone, city staff would just issue that permit. And so that's the proposed amendment. If you read the proposed amendment, you'll see that there's language about a major tree permit and a minor tree cutting permit, and that just distinguishes between more than 5 trees in a year and less than 5 trees in a year. So going back several months, and probably even further, there's more history to this discussion, but to the extent that I've been a part of it, the Planning Commission has deliberated over the proposed amendments, starting with some discussions about why changes are needed to the existing ordinance. The Planning Commission discussed why trees are valuable to the public. And the staff report references some of the ways that trees provide value to the public and to the city, and why the city would be interested in preserving trees and being aware of which and when trees are being cut down. And I added other reasons that are well established in the literature on the value that trees provide. So you have a basis for why tree cutting is regulated. Tree cutting gets a lot of attention from neighbors. So oftentimes when a Gearhart resident is cutting down trees, neighbors will call into City Hall and inquire about whether or not that tree cutting is allowed. And city staff, often without having any permit on file or any awareness of what's going on, will have to do homework to figure out whether the neighbor that's cutting trees is doing it in a manner that's allowed, whether they're cutting down too many trees, and so on and so forth. So one of the main reasons that the amendments are proposed is to provide an improved level of awareness for city staff so that they can provide better customer service and be more responsive to Gearhart residents when they call into City Hall asking about what's going on with this tree cutting that's happening in my neighborhood. Secondly, this system that requires someone to come in for a permit will at least allow the city to track and quantify the number of trees that are being cut down within the city. And that information can be used to assess how many trees over a longer period of time are being removed from the city's forest, and potentially inform future policies around the city's urban forest management. And finally, requiring a permit for cutting less than 5 trees will establish a record for any given property of what tree cutting is occurring, so that if an applicant wants to come in to cut down more than 5 trees and needs a permit from the Planning Commission, the Planning Commission will have a record of information about what kind of tree cutting has already occurred, that it's in line with the city's regulations. And so these are some of the main reasons that were established throughout the last several months in Planning Commission discussions for having these proposed amendments. And those discussions were held in, public Planning Commission meetings where the topic was advertised on the agenda beforehand. And so it's never too late to comment, and we'll welcome additional comments this evening on the proposal. So a little bit about the approval criteria and the process, the remaining process for completing the amendments. For a text amendment to the city zoning code, there's two primary criteria. And one is that it has to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. And the other is that it has to fulfill a public need or a public purpose. So I just discussed the public purpose that's being fulfilled by the proposed amendments. I'll go on to say that the comprehensive plan doesn't directly speak to the city's urban forest or tree management. So there's a couple of references to trees where you can find the word tree in the comprehensive plan, but it doesn't speak directly to these to this section of the zoning ordinance or what's being amended. So in that regard, the proposal is not inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. It is consistent with the comprehensive plan. So the two substantive criteria, that there's a public purpose, that it's consistent with the comprehensive plan, those criteria are met. Beyond that, a legislative text amendment to the zoning ordinance is a decision that ultimately lies with the city council. So the Planning Commission tonight will hear testimony, will deliberate, and ultimately decide whether or not to recommend that the city council approve the proposed amendments. The Planning Commission can make that recommendation. They can recommend that the city council not go forward and not approve the amendments, or they can direct staff to make some changes based on testimony or additional facts or their deliberation tonight. So that's everything that I wanted to cover with the proposed amendments, and I'll be available to answer questions throughout the rest of the hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Garrett. A question for you, Garrett. In making a recommendation, say we do recommend that we move this on to the city council, do we approve the proposed amendments and have to include the words recommended to the city council? How that isn't in your decision options. I didn't know if we need to match the city council in the motion.
So you can, if I understand the question correctly, the motion would recommend approval of the proposed amendments contained in attached, that I don't think we have to be too formal about referring to them. There's only one set of proposed amendments that are being considered.
Okay.
And yeah.
Okay, thank you. Do any of you have questions for Garrett?
Well, actually,
John?
yeah.
It's John.
Do we require an actual permit form to be included with this? Because it refers to different kinds of permits, but we don't provide any examples of form. Did we previously have a form for the +5?
Yeah.
We did have a form.
Yeah.
So yes,
Go
we've
ahead.
worked. Yeah, so staff have drafted a form that will be used by applicants to request a permit. That being said, the form itself, just like a conditional use application form or a variance application form, those are not actually part of the zoning ordinance. So we're not amending those and creating the form, and the form of the form is is basically a staff decision. We'll absolutely be happy to take feedback from you all as we continue to work on it. But I would say that about 2 months ago, we paused our work on the form, pending the outcome of the actual zoning code amendment.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? No. Okay, so we're basically the applicant, so we've heard from the staff report. So are there any proponents here tonight? Do we have any opponents? No. Do we have any neutral comments? No. Okay, that's really easy. I close the public hearing. Now we can have some discussion, and I know Russ has something to say.
Okay. Well, I thought that in our previous discussion, we had talked about a circumference. Measurement rather than diameter. And that, I think I mentioned Angelina a few days ago and then Chad as well. But anyway, I'm recommending it under 8B, the definition. Instead of 12 inches, it's 12 inches diameter, it's 30 inches circumference. That was one of my things.
30 or 38?
Oh, excuse me, 38, yeah.
I know you agree.
No, well, these glasses are taken a change. But should I just give you everything I have here tonight?
Yeah, let me ask this. Garrett, can we, with our discussion, change some of the wording with this and still be okay?
Yes, as long as it's not like a fundamentally changing like the nature of what we're doing. But yeah, something like that, we can move forward to city council
Okay,
with that change. Yeah.
thank you. And
Yeah.
what's your other one?
Well, okay, then if we go down to under requirements, well, this was discussed by Garrett, that I felt like the 5 tree, the major permit, I thought the city could just approve it rather than the planning commission. And I don't know, that's just me throwing that out there because we have 2 permits, we have the minor, the major. If it has to come to us, then it's a longer process. I'm just saying that's my suggestion. We can talk about that as a group.
I suggested that last time and everybody said no. I didn't think it was a function of the planning commission.
Well, then 2 of us are recommending suggesting that.
Okay,
I would just point out that, this is John speaking, that previously, in the original language, the planning commission had to be engaged. I agree with you, by the way. I don't particularly care whether we're engaged or not, but the original language did have us involved with that kind of.
No, I remember, that's what, so anyway, that's just, well, I'll give you the rest of mine and then we can see.
yes, please.
The other one, under 4, small a, I don't think that should be in there. As a replacement of trees proposed for removal will be replacement of trees proposed for removal with trees of a suitable type and location. I don't think that's part of what we should be doing. To me, it's like if somebody says I want to put a tree down and they meet the criteria of solar, leaves, its own septic field, they cut the tree down. If we're suggesting that somebody has to put another tree in its place or somewhere else on the property, then we have a subjective situation. Well, then what's a suitable tree? We either make a list of suitable trees and somebody goes out there and says, you cut the tree right in front of the, next to the garage, we'd like to see one on the back corner. Anyway, that's just me saying what's the purpose of this whole procedure. And then my last, let's see. Okay, the forest, I would change the language instead of.
Where are you now?
I'm on criteria Number two, necessity to remove trees which are diseased, evidence of disease shall be provided by a forester. I say evidence of a disease may require the opinion of, that way, if Chad, if you have a tree that's completely screwed up,
That's a good point.
you know, Chad can go out there and say, this thing's gonna fall over tomorrow morning.
This is major tree removal. This is 5 or more.
Yeah,
Well, exactly, but still, if every time we have a major tree removal, we have to have a forester. This is my opinion, that's another one of my criteria, or another one of my suggestions. And then the other one is for second paragraph. The burden of proof is on the applicant, so what other design alternatives?
I'm sorry, where are we again?
Well, I'm on criteria
E4.
number 4.
Okay.
And the second little paragraph. That the applicant has to show other design criteria alternatives which don't require the tree removal. Well, then so that's us getting design review. I mean, if you come in with your house plan and you say, here it is, the size of this room, if it's a tree right in the middle of this desk, and you say, well, what's your alternative design? Then we become, it isn't because Russ Taggart wants a pool room. It's like, well, put your pool room here there.
Well,
Anyway,
this is.
yes, okay, okay. John, yes.
I understand what you're saying on that last point, and commenting on the others this time, but this design alternative concept seems to be almost irrelevant, because if you look at section 8C1, this whole thing doesn't even apply to improvements. In other words, if you're building a house or you're adding a house, this whole section is irrelevant. Some other zoning code and requirements come into play. So I see your point. I'm not even sure why that's even there. Why would there be design alternatives associated with this if we're not even touching a situation where we're talking about construction?
And I think,
Yeah,
I think that's because it's based off the ordinance itself. All we did was all you guys did was add to an ordinance that already existed for other things as well. Am I wrong, Garrett?
Yeah, so the there's a few things here. So all of those criteria for approval that we just discussed, necessity to remove trees which pose a safety hazard, burden of proof is on the applicant to show that other design alternatives are not practical, and the potential conditions that the Planning Commission could put on a tree removal, those were all already in the zoning ordinance applying, and they were only applicable to a Planning Commission decision on whether to remove 5 or more trees, and they remain in the proposal only applicable to Planning Commission decisions on whether to remove five or more trees. The feedback we heard from the Planning Commission was to leave that decision and criteria alone, and that we were really focusing on removal of less than 5 trees in a year with these amendments. It's also true that for new construction or the placement of structures or a septic facility, that's not subject to a tree permit. It already was not. We moved the language from E3 on the second page to C1 on the first page, but the language is, and the intent of it is still there. We just wanted it to apply to both major and minor tree permits. So we took it out of that second section that only applies to major permits under the proposal. Sorry, you had a relatively specific question and invited me to start speaking. So I had a few things to say there. The final thing I'll say is that if the planning commission wants to consider all of these ideas, this is great. This is what these meetings are for. If you end up wanting you think you want to propose moving forward with any of these, I would say these are more substantive changes. And we should, I would say if there was just one of them for us to focus on, we could reopen the hearing, make sure that anyone from the public in attendance understands what's being proposed to change, invite anyone to comment on that, right? We have to make sure that opportunity exists. If we're talking about more than one, I want to make sure that I think we need to continue the hearing to another date, make sure that we have the text right, that people know what's being proposed. Because this was the language at the last planning commission meeting where we heard from you, yes, keep it the same and come back with a hearing. So if there's enough room for that kind of confusion between that meeting and this meeting, if we're changing things now, this much stuff, I don't think we should go straight to city council, but let's work through the issues and make sure we're getting what we want. And with that, I'll let you all get back to it.
Okay, thank you, Garrett. On the sheet we have, under that criteria, we have E 1, 2, and 3 is blank. Is there supposed to be something in 3?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah,
It's,
that's a formatting problem I need to correct. So if you
that should be 4. I mean, 4 should be 3 is what I'm asking.
yeah, and if you look at the version with the changes tracked that are in the packet, you'll see that language that used to be in 3 that's been moved.
All right, I just
Yeah.
want to make sure I understood that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see, John.
So let's just, first of all, Garrett, I very much appreciate what you're saying. We did indeed say at the last meeting, make a minimum level of change, did exactly that, nobody's mad, makes sense. But I think that Russ brings up 3 good points. They are 3, it's not 10. So let's just make sure we're clear on which 3 we're talking about. One is the circumference thing, which I think you kind of bought into, whether or not we agree as a group, that's kind of, you bought into the idea that that's a minor change. The second one was whether D4A should be here or not. And that's, I agree, somewhat something that maybe requires us to reopen the meeting. But I want to just clarify, it's those 2, and then your invitation to speak on this came from this third point. And I just want to get back to this third point for a moment, because this third point still confuses me. Yes, it was in the language before, but it still doesn't make any sense to me, because the language, which actually previously was number 3 in E, it was E3, so it was right above the section, basically says that this does not apply to any construction or renovation work, or whatever the language was. It says proposed improvements, placement of structures, yada, yada, yada. And then right after it says the burden is on the applicant to show the clear design alternatives. Does anybody have any, do you, Garrett, have any perspective of what the intent was of that language about design alternatives when we have specifically excluded this language from being relevant to home construction, if you will? Are we talking about landscape design perhaps at this point?
Yeah, I don't know the intent or
Yeah.
what any prior discussions that took place on the relationship between those 2 provisions.
So I would just say, I'll end here, that Russ makes 3 good points. I absolutely agree on number 1. I from the beginning thought some comments made more sense. Doesn't much matter, I suppose, but I think it's an easy change. This one, the third one makes no sense to me. The language is here. It's probably not particularly burdensome that it exists, but it doesn't make any sense that it's here. So I would recommend we get rid of it. The second one that Russ proposed, and we haven't asked for votes yet, I'm just kind of expressing my opinion. I think it's actually okay that it stays, because it just gives the it's major, the planning commission, or if we chose it to be staff, the option to come back to say to a applicant that, hey, did you ever consider the possibility? It's just one thing that they can have in, or in our, it doesn't require us to say, you must replace it. It just says, we can consider that. So just to end, I agree with you on one. I agree with you on three, that makes no sense if that's there. And four A, less connected to.
I can't address three. We did have an application, before you joined, I believe. And they were gonna remove a whole pile of trees. And as a planning commission, we said to them, can you do this some other way? Can you remove less trees? And indeed, the builder did figure out a way to remove less trees.
But
And-
within the context of a building.
Well, it was them coming in and getting approval to do something, and so we did.
Yeah.
He gave us something different, it gave us, it says, based on a finding that at least one of the following criteria, so they have a choice of
Right.
there.
Right, and I was here for that, I do remember that. And I was comment, I don't think that one related to this ordinance, or this, what we call these things, because that was a builder building something. And the builder building something, this goes out the window, we're in a different section. That's why I think this is confusing, that this even exists in this section.
Or is it just part of the solar practices?
Yeah,
It could be.
yes. Yes, that was Paul. Yes, I believe you're totally correct, Paul. It does for solar access. Don, do you have anything to add?
I have a couple things. To clarify, it's not 5 and more trees, it's 6 and more trees is a major permit. 1 through 5 is a minor. Yeah.
Where does it say, where are you referring to specifically?
Well, I just heard a lot of people refer to 5
Oh,
and more,
and I
and
guess say more.
Oh, 2-5,
it's, the 5th one's free. Or a
Right,
minor permit.
right.
right.
Okay, so it's not 5 or more, it would be 6 or more.
It says more than 5.
It's more than 5.
Okay, so it's not 5 and more. I think we just need to clarify that. So the first 5 are minor. All right. Okay.
Our minor.
Okay, and then I think the circumference thing is brilliant, Russ. Really, we should do that. The replacement of trees. I mean, that makes some. You know, if we're going to remove trees for whatever reason, if it's for aesthetics or for septic, and then have to replace them, that's illogical. And if it's a minor or major permit, I don't even think that really should apply. I would think we should vote on omitting that. And then the design review, you bring up a good point, Paulina, as does everybody else. Like, we don't want to be design review people, but maybe that's a method just to get applicants to clarify. And the other point that Russ did bring up was, does this need to come in front of the planning commission if it's a major permit? And I think, honestly, it probably doesn't have to come in front of the planning commission, but I feel like the staff would probably appreciate that protection. And I bet you that's why that's in there. It's because it's a major permit, and I mean, maybe Angelina can address that if that would be helpful or more burdensome to you in chat for that.
I think it's more helpful for the city staff, just because there's a lot of backlash.
Sorry.
We
We
get
get a lot of criticism
Yeah.
from what they permit in that, so if it's going to the planning commission, then they have some backup. I'm interpreting over here from the master.
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Judy?
I don't think I have anything substantive to add.
Okay,
The one thing I will say though is that, under requirements 4A, such a condition, what it says in the first section is such a conditions may involve, but are not limited to the following. So the fact that it's listed there, it may be involved that trees are to be replaced. It's not a requirement that trees are replaced.
Totally.
So I don't have any problem with it being there, because it just maybe, not limited to.
Okay. Fine, do you have something for us?
I'm just gonna comment one thing. First of all, I agree with the changing to the 38 inches. I wasn't sure how that just got, I remember it happening, it just dropped off
Yes.
kind of quickly. So, I do agree with that, but, I'll just tell you one story. There was a house about 2 years ago that was built, just 2 houses up for me. Big, huge spruce in the front yard and right up pretty close to the road. And, chopped down one day and I probably cried, when I see those spruce trees go down. It's kind of a medium, big tree. And, later on then I'm watching, they put the septic in. It was basically within 10 feet of the tree. And, like trying to get okay with this as the house gets built. Well, now they probably have planted a dozen trees on kind of the berm next to the road, pretty much where that one tree sat. So now they have cypress and others that seem like they grow pretty well here. No spruces, but anyway, that to me, now that I have time to think about it, that is kind of the spirit, I think, of this policy. Even though it doesn't specifically say you have to do that. But I think in the end, they did the right thing, but I still shed tears over the spruce trees and that's it.
I would hope that my calculations when I did a couple of months ago was that the 12 inches across equals about 37.68. So Russ rounded that up. So I would hope that that would not be a substantive change. However, everything else I would leave in there. I would like the planning commission to have some ability review. Much like Helena, we had a new house going in for 3R, and they went and cut down all these beautiful trees. And they'll probably put some other trees in there, but these other trees that were healthy and looked lovely, and if I had them, I would have kept them, are now gone. And sometimes it becomes real easy to just take down the trees. But they're valuable, I guess. I don't know what they are, but anyway, that's what. Anything else?
So, Garrett, if we change that circumference to 38 inches, would that be okay? Since that is actually a little bigger than the 12-inch diameter?
Yeah, we can move forward with that. If that's all you wanted to change, we can just move forward with that. I think that the other changes, like the right way to do that is for us to write them down and come back for another hearing, or continue the hearing and we bring it back to you. It's tempting to just put it together here because there's not a whole lot of public interest that's been shown. But I think it opens us up to some challenge potentially by just changing it on the fly, without giving, without having it, be available to everyone to see ahead of time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So according to my notes, if we change the circumference, but we're going to keep the planning commission involved, we're going to keep the replacement as a tool. And we're going to keep the burden of proof for design alternatives in there. Then the only one word I noticed change was E2, necessity to remove trees which are disease evidence of disease may be provided instead of shall. So changing shall to may was one suggestion. So those, from what I'm hearing, would be the only two changes. Which I think we could probably go forward.
Why don't we try it?
Okay.
Do I have motion?
So moved.
So moved. Commissioner Frank is moving that we accept the proposal changing the measurement from the 12-inch diameter to 38-inch circumference, which is actually a little bigger. And changing the word on E to evidence of disease may be provided. Is that
That's correct.
May require a qualified. not shall.
may?
May be, yeah, say that
May
again.
require a qualified forester, not shall require.
Yeah, may require a,
Actually, may be provided by a qualified forester.
Maybe.
Oh.
Just change the word.
Straight down.
shall.
Because the-
Just, okay, okay, so it's that's a minor change. Is that correct?
that is correct.
Do I have a second to that motion? Commissioner Schefter is seconded. Is there any further discussion?
One very minor.
Yeah.
Super minor. Should we take the paragraph, the carriage return out, so that that burden of proof language goes up into the solar section where we have seemed to agree that it belongs, as opposed to applying to all of the criteria?
I did it on my.
In other words, take out the space on number E3, the line space between rooftops and the burden. Is that what you're saying? I believe that's just a typing thing.
Well, I think this might be reformatted.
Yeah, well,
You said, yeah,
Well, yeah, but I just need to make sure we've got our.
I hear you.
Garrett said, yeah.
I'll make
Okay. All right. So we have it there. We've taken care of the space. All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Abstentions? All right, so it is passed. We recommend, you have the recommendation, Garrett and Angelina. Are we okay? Nod your head, Garrett.
Yes. Yes, I understood.
All right. So let's see, what else do we have on the agenda? We don't have any unfinished business, new business, and I meant to put this in there. We have nothing for the December meeting. If it is by consensus that you would agree that we do not need to have a December meeting, we can move it forward, or if you have a reason that you would like it to be in December, please say it now. Hearing nothing, this has been approved by the staff already, so we won't have a meeting since there's nothing on the agenda. And right now, there's nothing on the agenda in January, but I'm sure something will come along. Maybe. Any concerns of the commission?
That's not a concern, but I want to say high five to Terry. Because he's going away and I had the pleasure of working with him during the vacation rental debacle, which I think is pretty important to the village. And Terry was really influential. So thank you.
Thanks for your kind words. It's like a lot of dragon. When I came on the planning commission, I came over to your house.
Yeah.
Sat on the steps and I asked you, what should we do? Or how do I go about this? And he said, just sit around, stay quiet, learn the ropes. And the first meeting I asked Richard about short-term rentals, he has said, well, we're just gonna pick low-hanging fruit. And I asked you if we cut the tree down.
Full circle.
Yeah,
The rest,
starting with trees, end with trees.
Yeah.
long time ago, 8 years.
Yeah.
So we had two terms on the commission.
I had to check with her.
Right, thank you, Russ. Any other concerns? No questions for the land use attorney? It is 7:50. Good evening, good holidays, and we will see you next year.
I think it's 6:50.
It's 6:50. I thought it was 7 and that. Thank you.
I had to look.
Officially, I don't.
I'm sorry. We're just like already up in the neighborhood.